The United States has a long history of engagement with Africa, dating back to the early years of its independence when it established diplomatic relations with the new states emerging on the continent. In the decades that followed, U.S. policy towards Africa has evolved to reflect changing global dynamics, shifting priorities, and emerging challenges. Today, the United States views Africa as a region of growing strategic importance, both in terms of its economic potential and its security implications. As such, U.S. policy towards Africa is characterized by a focus on promoting economic growth, strengthening democratic institutions, advancing human rights, and countering security threats. Economic development. One of the key pillars of U.S. policy towards Africa is promoting economic growth and development on the continent. To this end, the U.S. has launched several initiatives aimed at boosting trade and investment between the United States and African countries, such as the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, which provides duty-free access to the U.S. market for certain African goods. Additionally, the United States has been investing in infrastructure development in Africa, including the construction of new roads, bridges, and other transportation systems, as well as the expansion of access to electricity and clean water. These investments are aimed at improving the business climate in African countries, creating jobs, and spurring economic growth. Democracy and human rights. Another key focus of U.S. policy in Africa is promoting democracy and human rights. The United States provides assistance to support the development of democratic institutions, including elections, political parties, and civil society organizations. The U.S. also works with African governments to promote respect for human rights and the rule of law, and to combat corruption. In recent years, the United States has also become increasingly concerned about the rise of authoritarianism and democratic backsliding in some African countries. In response, the U.S. has stepped up its support for pro-democracy activists and civil society groups, and has imposed targeted sanctions on individuals and entities that have undermined democracy or engaged in human rights abuses. Security. The security situation in Africa is another area of growing concern for the United States. The U.S. has been working with African governments and regional organizations to counter the threat posed by terrorist groups such as Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, and the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, ISGS. The U.S. has also been involved in efforts to promote peace and stability in conflict-affected regions, such as the Sahel and the Great Lakes region. The United States has provided military assistance, training, and equipment to African partners to help them address security threats, and has supported peacekeeping operations in countries such as Mali, the Central African Republic, and South Sudan. All in all, U.S. policy towards Africa is guided by a desire to promote economic growth, democracy, and security on the continent. While the United States faces numerous challenges in achieving these goals, it remains committed to working with African partners to address them. Through sustained engagement and cooperation, the United States hopes to help create a more prosperous, democratic, and stable Africa for the benefit of all its people.